This story comes from the Trentino region of Italy. Trentino lies in the southern reaches of the Alps, a mountain range known as the Dolomites. These mountains get their name from their unique limestone composition, which gives them a naturally radiant white color. It's a landscape filled with forests, valleys, and villages, as beautiful as you could possibly imagine. From Italian folk tales selected and retold by Italo Calvino, this is the story of the dead man's arm. Let's begin. It was the custom in a certain village that whenever a man should die, his sister would keep watch over his grave 3 nights in a row. If a girl was to die, then the watch would be kept by her brother instead. A certain maiden died, and the girl's brother, a strapping youth who was afraid of nothing under the sun, went to the cemetery for the usual vigil. At the stroke of midnight, 3 dead men arose from their graves and asked, "How about a game?" "Why not?" he answered. "But where do you want to play?" "We always play in church." They led him into the church and down into an underground crypt that was packed with rotting coffins and a jumble of human bones. They picked through the bones and took a skull and went back into the church, where they stood the bones in a straight line along the floor. "These are our 9 pins." They picked up the skull. "And this is our ball." And they began bowling. "Do you want to play for money?" "Certainly." The young man bowled with the skull and was so good at it that he won each time and took every cent the dead men had. As soon as they ran out of money, they returned the ball and 9 pins to the crypt and retreated back to their graves. On the second night, the dead men wished to play the return game, staking rings and gold teeth. And again, the young man won everything. The third night, they played still another round, at the end of which the men said to the youth, "You've won again, and we have nothing to give you. But since gaming debts are settled on the spot, we offer you this dead man's arm, which is well preserved, although a bit dry, and will come in handier than any sword. Whichever enemy you touch with it, the arm will grab him around the chest and throw him down dead, even if he is a giant." Having said this, the dead men departed and left the young man there, standing with that arm in his hand. The next morning he took the money and gold he had won at 9 pins and gave them to his father, saying, "Dear father, I am going out into the world and seeking my fortune." His father gave him his blessing, and that young man departed with the dead man's arm under his cloak. He went on until he came to a large city, the walls of which had been draped in black crepe, which is a type of thin, crinkled cloth. The people were all dressed in mourning, and even their horses and carriages had been draped in black. "What has happened here?" he asked a sobbing passerby, who responded, "That mountain, mind you, is a black castle occupied by sorcerers who exact from us a human being a day. And that is the end of the poor soul who goes to them. First, they called for all the girls, and the king was obliged to send every last one of the chambermaids, housewives, baker girls, and weavers, and then all the maids of honor at court, all the noble ladies, and most recently the king's one and only daughter as well, and not one of them has returned. Now the king sends his soldiers there 3 by 3, but they fare no better. Oh, if someone would deliver us from these sorcerers, we would reward him with whatever he wanted." "I will see what I can do about this," said the young man, and he asked to be taken to the king at once. "Your Majesty, I will go to the castle all by myself." The king looked him in the eye and said, "If you succeed, and if you free my daughter, I'll give her to you in marriage. You need only spend 3 nights at the castle for the spell to be broken and the sorcerers to vanish. Tomorrow morning, if you're still alive, on the battlements of the castle is a cannon. Fire it once. The morning after, twice, and the third morning, 3 times." When night fell, he went to the black castle with the dead man's arm. He went up a long row of stairs and came to a large room where there was a table set and laden with food. But all the chairs had been turned so that their back was towards the table. He left everything just as it was, went into the kitchen, lit the fire, and sat down by the hearth with the dead man's arm at the ready. At midnight, he heard a chorus of voices in the chimney. "Many, many have we slain. You will be the next to wane. Many, many have we slain. You will be the next to wane." Then bang, bang, bang! 3 sorcerers came down the chimney. They all had frightfully ugly faces and long, long noses that wavered like octopus tentacles and clutched at the young man's arms and legs. Realizing it was vital to steer clear of those noses, he began brandishing the dead man's arm as though he were fencing. He tapped the first sorcerer on the chest, but nothing happened. He touched the second sorcerer on the head, but still nothing happened. Then he tapped the third sorcerer's nose, and that arm seized that nose and gave it such a yank that it left the sorcerer dead on the spot. Fully aware now that those noses were both dangerous and sensitive, the young man took aim. He seized the second sorcerer, finished him off. And then he took care of the third. Rubbing his hands together in contentment, he went off to bed. That morning, he climbed up to the battlements of the castle and fired the cannon. Boom! Down in the valley below, where everyone anxiously waited, a crowd of black-bordered handkerchiefs waved in response. That evening, when he went to the dining room, he noticed that a few of the chairs had been turned so that they now properly faced the table. Through other doors filed maids of honor and noble ladies, downcast and clad in mourning. They addressed the young man, "Please, persevere and free us." Then they sat down to the table and dined. After dinner, the women bowed low and departed. The young man went into the kitchen and sat by the hearth to wait for midnight. After the 12th chime had struck, dong, 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 voices were again heard in the chimney. "3 of our brothers you slew, now we're coming after you. 3 of our brothers you slew, now we're coming after you." And bang, bang, bang! 3 sorcerers with long noses plummeted down the chimney. In a flash, he had each of them by the nose, and in no time at all, they were corpses themselves. On the second morning, he fired the cannon twice. Boom! Boom! Down in the valley below, a crowd of white handkerchiefs waved in response. The black mourning strip had been removed. On the third evening, he noticed that more chairs had been turned to face the table, and even more of the black-clad maidens came in greater numbers. They entreated the young man, "Just one more night, and then we'll all be free." They sat down to dinner together, and then bowed low before leaving. He went to his customary spot in the kitchen. At midnight, the voices set up a howl in the chimney like a whole choir. "6 of our brothers you slew, now we're coming after you. 6 of our brothers you slew, now we're coming after you." And bang, 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 bang! Sorcerers rained down by the dozens, all with their long noses sticking out. The young man whirled the dead man's arm around and around, and he killed them off as fast as they came. It was no trouble at all, since all that shriveled paw had to do was grab them by the nose, and they were corpses themselves. Thoroughly satisfied, he went to bed, and the minute the cock crowed, the whole castle came back to life. A procession of maids of honor and noble ladies came to thank him and pay him honor, and in the middle of the procession stood the princess herself. When she came to the young man, she threw her arms around his neck and said, "I want you to be my husband." 3 by 3, the freed soldiers entered and saluted. The young man gave them an order to go up to the battlements of the castle and fire the cannon 3 times. Down in the valley, the people heard the thunder of the cannon, and they vigorously waved yellow and green and red and blue handkerchiefs, accompanied by trumpets and bass drums. The young man led the procession of freed people back to the town, and they entered. All the black crepe was gone, and you only saw flags and colored streamers billowing in the wind. The king himself stood ready to meet them, and he had flowers entwined in his crown. The wedding was celebrated that very same day, and was such a grand event that people are still talking about it. And that is the end of the story. In this story, we see a young, unemployed man with nothing but a mummified arm and a whole lot of courage rescue an entire kingdom. He proves that one man can be greater than a royal army, that one man can restore hope to a township in mourning. Those villainous sorcerers had never encountered a weapon like the one the youth had and were defenseless. I believe that there is no such thing as wasted time, only wasted talent. In this life, we're given parts of ourselves or experiences that might seem useless or even a hindrance. But when we can turn these into our assets, they can be a more powerful weapon than any sword. When you turn your dead weight into a weapon, you will see your adversaries driven before you, and whatever curse once loomed over your life will be lifted. Once again, this has been the story of the dead man's arm, from Italian folk tales selected and retold by Italo Calvino. I'd like to thank my friend Michael for his support with this story, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Happy Halloween.